Okay, so here's a quick update on the horizontal stab on the Voyager. So I've already have the control arms installed on the control surface, and then I've got the advanced radio 8455 servo already installed in the controls in the horizontal stab. Now I did have to cut the opening for where the control arm comes out. One thing to note with this model, and I have noticed since I started building, is that the paint does chip relatively easy on this model. Sadly, as beautiful as the model is, the paint just does not hold as well as some of the models that I had built. So as I was cutting out the opening for the control surface, the paint just kept chipping off. So be extra careful when you guys are cutting the fiberglass when you guys are installing your control surfaces. So now that we are done with both horizontal stabs, we're going to move on with the vertical stab. Okay, so moving on to the tail section of the Voyager. I've already removed the thrust tube out of the tail section. The next thing we're going to do is install these 41 connectors from Powerbox Americas. They come with basically XT30 connectors on both ends, and then maxi wires on these connectors. And then also included in the kit are these mounting tabs that you basically just mount to the side of the fuselage, and then these connectors basically lock into place, and then you just screw them onto the fuselage. So I'm going to do that for the elevators and then the top for the rudder, and then we're going to run the wires forward and then make our final connectors for the tail section of this jet. Okay, so here is the finished product. So basically just cut out some plywood and mounted the connectors onto those plywood pieces, and then I blended in a little bit of gray so that it looks a little nicer. So what I'm going to do then is glue these wood formers from the inside, and the only thing that's going to stick out is these connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so we are now done with the connectors for the elevator, and then I wanted to show you guys the top for the rudder. Alright, so then what we're going to do now is basically do a bunch of insulation of the wires, and I've got some aluminum tape as well. So I'm going to go ahead and insulate those wires and then mount them to the side walls of the tail section of the fuselage. And then when I'm done with that, I'll show you guys how it looks. Alright, so here's a quick update of the tail section. So I pretty much put the wire looms through the elevator and the rudder, and then put some aluminum heat sink on the top section where the rudder wire is. So the last thing I need to do to finish up the wiring here, I've got the elevator rudder wire leads, and I just need to crimp down the pins for this 10-pin amp connector. Trying to get the camera to focus on it. There it is. Now the size of these pins are actually pretty ginormous. So in comparison, here is one of the pins that is included with the amp connectors. Now your standard servo pins right here on the right, trying to get the camera to focus, and then here is the amp connector. So look at the size of these things. So I'm going to be using these connectors for the elevator, rudder, and then also amp connectors on the wings for the flaps, aileron, brakes, and retracts. But I'm going to wrap up the wiring of the tail section and finish up the crimping of the, trying to get the camera to focus, there we go, 10-pin amp connector. Alright, and I'll show you guys that in the end. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do now to finish off the tail section is install our thrust tube. So we're just going to slide this in the position here, line it up. Then I'm going to have to go through the back side and kind of line that up really quick. So I'm going to do that first, and then I'll show you guys the mounting of the thrust tube, because the rails are not pre-drilled for you, so you're going to have to line that up and get it correct. Alright, so the next step now for the tail section is to glue the 19mm aluminum spar on the trailing edge, and then you got a 13mm on the leading edge. And basically you're going to glue these permanently to the stab, and then once that's set, then you just kind of slide your stab in place and then slide it in there. So there's two retention clamps one for the leading edge and one on the trailing edge that you have access through from the bottom that locks the stabs in place. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these stabs on these, both the horizontal stab, and then do the same thing for the vertical stab, and then we'll move on to the next section. Right, so I just wanted to show you guys really quick the aluminum tube or the spars that's going to be glued onto the horizontal stab. So you got your trailing edge and your leading edge. So basically I slid this down the entire length of the horizontal stab and then marked it where it sticks out, and that's the part that's going to insert into the fuselage, and then the clamping system is going to be on this end. But I just wanted to show you guys the roughness that I did. I just basically took a 80 grit sandpaper and then just basically kept twisting it until I got it pretty roughed up. So that gives it a lot better surface for the glue to adhere to, so that the tube doesn't slide out. Okay, so here is an update on the Voyager. Right now the issue that I'm having is that the mechanism down there, I'm not sure you guys can see it, basically it's spring loaded, and then there's a control rod that attaches to the gear door hinges. So right now the landing gear is fully retracted, and if you guys can see it, there's a gear, the strut, and then the little bar that goes across that basically pulls the gear doors up. But right now gear doors are not closing properly. Look at how much room we still have to kind of finagle to get this thing to close correctly. So I think what I'm going to end up doing, that's why there's a servo there. I just have a spare one in my workshop. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is removing that gear door mechanism and then just installing a servo to operate the landing gear doors. And then our Electron gear controller is where I'm going to end up programming the endpoints for the doors to close fully and then to open when the gear is extended. But in the meantime, give you guys a quick look at the setup right now. We got our competition SR2. Battery's not finalized yet. It's going to end up somewhere over here on the nose for CG. Here is the bottom of the fuselage. Now I just wanted to keep it simple, not do too much work to this jet. I could have put a component tray down there using Allotex board to make it look a little cleaner, but I think for now I just want to get this jet in the air. Honestly, I've got the ECU set up down there. Basically just glued a plywood board there to screw the ECU in place, and then the fuel pump. Back here we got our Electron gear controller. Now I did leave a little space up here because I am contemplating whether or not I want to put my GSU up here so that I can see what's going on with the turbine while it's starting. I am going to be putting telemetry on this jet anyway, so this just kind of an option. That's why I left it with a little bit of space. Now back here we have our wire for our ECU data, and then here's just kind of a quick peek of the inside installation for the amp connectors to boat wings. See it? And then down here is where we have our amp connector, again a 10-pin connector that I'm going to be plugging in the elevator and the rudder. So that's where we are at currently with the build. So I'll give you guys another update in a little bit. All right, so here's a quick update with the nose gear mechanism. So I went ahead and removed the mechanism that comes with the kit on this jet, and since it wasn't closing properly, I decided we were going to install a servo instead and have it servo operated. So I have just a spare servo that I have laying around. I'm not too concerned about the type of brand servo to install in the nose gear door. So since this is one of those servos that I just have laying around, I had no real use for it up until now. I decided to just use that servo. So basically what I did was at Home Depot, I got one of those angled aluminum brackets. And it came in a really long section, so I just cut the length that I needed, and then what I did was I drilled a 3mm hole and then tapped it with an M3, and then that became the mounting bracket for the servo. And then since the former has pre-cut holes on them, I ended up having to cut a wood former for the servos to screw on, because otherwise 2 out of the 4 would be, just so happen to line up with the holes. I'll move it, there it is. So 2 out of the 4 of the screws wind up just falling right through, lining up with that hole. So basically that's the mechanism now that I set up. Basically have the servo installed, and then we got our push rod that is attached to our offset hinges. And then what I'm gonna do, once I have that finalized and glued in place and screwed on, we're gonna go on to our Electron gear controller and program the endpoints and then the timing of the gear doors opening and closing. So that is it for now. I'm gonna give you guys another update once I have everything finalized, and then we'll do a quick cycle of the landing gear and show you guys how the gear doors operate. Alright, so here is the update on our gear door servo. So I've already got it mounted and then programmed on the Electron gear controller. So the cycle is going to be, with gears down, the doors remain open, which right now it is open. Once I hit the gears, it takes about 6 seconds for the gears to come up, so I put a delay of about 8 seconds on the gear before it starts to move. Now with the gears closing, I put about a 3-second delay in there of how long it's going to take to complete that cycle. So let's go ahead and cycle the landing gears now. Alright, gears coming up. We're going to wait. There we go. So gear door is now closed. So we're going to extend the landing gear now. Takes a second. There we go. I'm not sure why it took a little bit for it to come down. So let's cycle it one more time. So that's gear down. Door's gonna stay open. Gear's coming up. And there we go. Gear doors are closed. So that worked out pretty well. It actually was so much better than, let me put the transmitter down, than trying to work with this mechanism that the kit came with, which gives me really no real way to make any adjustments on how much the door closes and opens. So now with the gear door servo, I have plenty of adjustments if need to get this landing gear working properly. So I'm happy with this setup, ready to move on with the next phase of this build.